Welcome back to Palestine Bookshelf. I'm Stephen Heiner, and today we're going to be discussing 10 Myths About Israel by Ilan Pappe. I've done a 30-minute review for this book on my main channel, and I'm happy with it. So today I'm just going to do an express review of this one. I'll put a link in the description as well as a card for the original review, so if you want a more robust review, you can go check that out. This express review, I'm just going to read each of the myths, and I'm going to read a paragraph or so from each of those chapters to give you a sense of what he's talking about. There are so many things that we've covered in various other reviews on this channel, so I may refer to a card or a description, or I may do that at the end of the video, but what I'm going to focus on is just reading through these myths and some ideas. Chapter 1. Palestine was an empty land. The exact percentage of Jews prior to the rise of Zionism is unknown. However, it probably ranged from 2 to 5%. According to Ottoman records, a total population of 462,465 resided in 1878 in what is today Israel and Palestine. Of this number, 403,795, or 87%, were Muslim, 43,659, 10%, were Christians, and 15,011, 3%, were Jewish. The Jewish population of Palestine in 1878 was a micro-minority of the total population. The second myth, the Jews were a people without land. There are those who would like to question whether the Jews who settled in Palestine as Zionists in the aftermath of 1918 were really the descendants of the Jews who had been exiled by Rome 2,000 years ago. It began with popular doubts cast by Arthur Koestler, who wrote The 13th Tribe, in which he advanced the theory that the Jewish settlers were descended from the Khazars, a Turkish nation of the Caucasus that converted to Judaism in the 8th century and was later forced to move westward. Israeli scientists have ever since tried to prove that there is a genetic connection between the Jews of Roman Palestine and those of present-day Israel. Nevertheless, the debate continues today. The latest and most updated deconstruction of this idea came in Shlomo San's two books, The Invention of the Jewish People and The Invention of the Land of Israel. I respect and appreciate this scholarly effort. Politically, however, I think it is less significant than the assumption that denies the existence of the Palestinians, although it is a complement of that assumption. People are entitled to invent themselves, as so many national movements have done in their moment of inception. But the problem becomes acute if the Genesis narrative leads to political projects such as genocide, ethnic cleansing, and oppression. In the particular case of the claims of 19th century Zionism, it is not the historical accuracy of those claims that matters. What matters is not whether the present Jews in Israel are the authentic descendants of those who lived in the Roman era, but rather the state of Israel's insistence that it represents all the Jews in the world, and that everything it does is for their sake and on their behalf. Until 1967, this claim was very helpful for the state of Israel. Jews around the world, in particular in the United States, became its main supporters whenever its policies were questioned. In many respects, this is still the case in the United States today. However, even there, as well as in other Jewish communities, this clear association is nowadays challenged. The third myth, Zionism is Judaism. Gandhi thus questioned the very foundational logic of political Zionism, rejecting the idea of a Jewish state in the Promised Land by pointing out that the Palestine of the biblical conception is not a geographical tract. Thus, Gandhi disapproved of the Zionist project for both political and religious reasons. The endorsement of that project by the British government only alienated Gandhi further. He had no doubts about who Palestine belonged to. Palestine belongs to the Arabs in the same sense that England belongs to the English or France to the French. It is wrong and inhuman to impose the Jews on the Arabs. Surely it would be a crime against humanity to reduce the proud Arabs so that Palestine can be restored to the Jews partly or wholly as their national home. So it turns out that Gandhi is anti-Semitic. Myth 4, Zionism is not colonialism. By 1945, Zionism had attracted more than 500,000 settlers to a country whose population was about 2 million. Some came with the permission of the mandatory government, some without. The local native population was not consulted, nor was its objection to the project of turning Palestine into a Jewish state taken into account. The settlers managed to build a state within a state, constructing all the necessary infrastructure, but they failed in two respects. They managed to buy up only 7% of the land, which would not suffice for a future state. They were also still a minority, 1/3 in a country in which they wanted to be the exclusive nation. As with all earlier settler colonial movements, the answer to these problems was the twin logic of annihilation and dehumanization. The settlers' only way of expanding their hold on the land beyond the 7% and of ensuring an exclusive demographic majority was to remove the natives from their homeland. Zionism is thus a settler colonial project, and one that has not yet been completed. Palestine is not entirely Jewish demographically, and although Israel controls all of it politically by various means, the state of Israel is still colonizing, building new colonies in the Galilee, the Negev, and the West Bank for the sake of increasing the number of Jews there, dispossessing Palestinians, and denying the right of the natives to their homeland. Myth 5. The Palestinians voluntarily left their homeland in 1948. A study of the writings and thoughts of the early Zionist leaders shows that by 1948, this crime was inevitable. The goal of Zionism had not changed. It was dedicated to taking over as much of mandatory Palestine as possible and removing most of the Palestinian villages and urban neighborhoods from the space carved out for the future Jewish state. The execution was even more systematic and comprehensive than anticipated in the plan. In a matter of 7 months, 531 villages were destroyed and 11 urban neighborhoods emptied. The mass expulsion was accompanied by massacres, rape, and the imprisonment of males over the age of 10 in labor camps for periods of over a year. Myth number 6, the June 1967 war was a war of no choice. The whole of Israeli society was galvanized around the messianic project of liberating the holy places of Judaism, with Jerusalem as the jewel in the new crown of Greater Israel. Left and right-wing Zionists and Israel's supporters in the West were also caught up in and mesmerized by this euphoric hysteria. In addition, there was no intention of leaving the West Bank and the Gaza Strip immediately after their occupation. In fact, there was no desire to leave them at all. This should stand as further proof of Israeli responsibility for the final deterioration of the May 1967 crisis into a full-blown war. If you appreciate this content, consider hitting like, subscribe, sharing this with other people who you think might be interested. Myth 7. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. There is further evidence that Israel was not a democracy prior to 1967. The state pursued a shoot-to-kill policy towards refugees trying to retrieve their land, crops, and husbandry, and staged a colonial war to topple Nasser's regime in Egypt. Its security forces were also trigger-happy, killing more than 50 Palestinian citizens during the period of 1948 to 1967. Today, more than 90% of the land is owned by the Jewish National Fund. Landowners are not allowed to engage in transactions with non-Jewish citizens, and public land is prioritized for the use of national projects, which means that new Jewish settlements are being built, while there are hardly any new Palestinian settlements. Thus, the biggest Palestinian city, Nazareth, despite the tripling of its population since 1948, has not expanded 1 square kilometer, whereas the development town built above it, Upper Nazareth, has tripled in size, on land expropriated from Palestinian landowners. Myth number 8, the Oslo mythologies. So in truth, without the application of extreme pressure, there is no reason in the world why a native population would ever volunteer to partition its homeland with a settler population. And therefore, we should acknowledge that the Oslo process was not a fair and equal pursuit of peace, but a compromise agreed to by a defeated, colonized people. As a result, the Palestinians were forced to seek solutions that went against their interests and endangered their very existence. Myth 9, the Gaza mythologies. The Israeli policy did not undermine Hamas. On the contrary, it enhanced its popularity and power. Sharon wanted the Palestinian Authority to take control of Gaza and treat it like Area A in the West Bank. But this outcome did not materialize. So Sharon had to deal with Gaza in one of two ways, Either clear out the settlers so that he could retaliate against Hamas without the risk of hurting Israeli citizens, or depart altogether from the region in order to refocus his efforts on annexing the West Bank or parts of it. In order to ensure that the second alternative was understood internationally, Sharon orchestrated a charade that everybody fell for. As he began to make noises about evicting the settlers from the Strip, Gush Emunim compared the action to the Holocaust and staged a real show for the television when they were physically evicted from their homes. It seemed as if there were a civil war in Israel between those who supported the settlers and those on the left, including formidable foes of Sharon in the past, who supported his plan for a peace initiative. Myth 10. The two-state solution is the only way forward. The two-state solution is like a corpse taken out in the morgue every now and then, dressed up nicely and presented as a living thing. When it has been proven once more that there is no life left in it, it is returned to the morgue. In the future, the only thing that might change is the United Nations admitting Palestine as a full member. At the same time, we might also see the completion of the Israeli takeover of Area C, more than 50% of the West Bank. The tension between the two, the symbolic act in the UN Security Council, and the reality on the ground, may be too much for the international community to bear. The best scenario imaginable might be that such circumstances force everyone to go back to the drawing board and rethink a solution to the conflict from first principles. An optimistic ending. If you'd like to get a copy of this book, there's a link in the description. That's one of the ways that you can support this channel. You can also hit like, subscribe. It's a free way that you can support this channel. Share it with people who might be interested in hearing from an Israeli historian who takes the side of the Palestinians. As far as cards and links in the description, what I'll do for myth number 2, the Jews were a people without a land, I'll put a link to my short review of Tom Segev's One Palestine Complete. For the Palestinians voluntarily left their homeland in 1948, I'll put a link to 2 videos, my 2-part review of The Birth of the Palestinian Refugee Problem Revisited by Benny Morris. June 1967 War was a war of no choice. I'll put a link in the description to my 1967 playlist. And for the Gaza mythologies, I'll put a link to Noam Finkelstein's, my review of Noam Finkelstein's Gaza, an account of its martyrdom, as well as a link to Gaza in Crisis by Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappe. So, if you'd like to thank me for this presentation, consider using PayPal or Buy Me a Coffee. If you want to support this work on an ongoing basis, you can use Patreon or YouTube membership. You'll get early access to videos like this one, have a chance to chat with me behind the scenes, as well as get videos that I only release to my members that are not available to the general public. If you'd like to nominate a book for the future, my Amazon wishlist is below. You can navigate through there, and obviously books on Palestine are for this project. Other books are for my main Stephen Heiner channel, which you're welcome to go visit. Buy a copy of the book, send it my way. You'll effectively sponsor the video, and I'll do my best to review that in a timely manner. There's also a link to the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. Our goal when this channel gets monetized, which you can help us do by watching as many videos as you can to increase our watch hours, is to give 100% of the profits to this charity. You'll find a link for them in the description. Go see their work, support them directly, or support them indirectly by supporting our channel. We hope to contribute to what they do. They help Palestinian children get medical care who could not otherwise get it. Until next time, enjoy your reading.